My name is Laura Bennett. I'm 34 years old, a high school history teacher, and until recently, my life revolved around stuffy classrooms, endless meetings, and a principal who seemed to thrive on other people's despair. It was at the beginning of last September that I finally gathered the courage to resign. I didn't have a grand plan. I just knew I needed to breathe. So I decided to do something I had always dreamed of, a solo trip, with no fixed destination, just my car, a tent, and a bit of hope to find some peace again. I chose an isolated spot near the Missouri River, one of those places you only find after deep searching or a tip from an obscure forum for lone travelers. I remember arriving on a cloudy afternoon when the sun looked like a dirty coin in the sky. The field where I parked was about a 15-minute walk from the main road, perfect for someone wanting to stay off the radar. Everything felt so right. The smell of wet earth, the slow sound of the river running, the silence broken only by the lazy hum of insects. I pitched my tent on firm ground near some twisted trees that looked like old hands pointing to the sky. In those first moments, all I felt was a childish relief. I laughed to myself, thinking, "That's it, Laura. You finally did something for yourself." The first 2 nights passed like a dream. I spent the days reading in a beat-up camping chair, fishing small fish. I barely knew how to clean them, but I grilled them over the fire anyway, and writing random thoughts in an old notebook I brought. But on the 3rd morning, when I woke up, I noticed something strange. As I stepped out of the tent, I saw marks on the ground. Not animal tracks, like raccoons or deer, which I would have expected. They were human footprints. And not just that. The zipper of my tent, which I always closed carefully, was partially open. It seemed like a small oversight, but I knew it wasn't. I could swear I had closed it before going to sleep. I tried to convince myself it was just paranoia. Maybe another camper had wandered by at night and approached by mistake, or maybe it was the wind, although nothing else was out of place. Curiously, near the tree where I kept my cans of food, I found some turned over, as if someone had rummaged through them, but taken nothing. I forced a laugh and muttered to myself that I should have brought a dog along, but deep down, a cold knot was already forming in my chest. I tried to ignore it. I decided I would stay one more day, and if anything strange happened again, I would go back to the city. But, as you can imagine, it wasn't that simple. That night, I stayed more alert. Instead of diving into the tent as soon as the sun disappeared, I sat by the campfire, letting the flames' warmth lick my face as I watched the darkness breathing around me. The river reflected only a sliver of moonlight, and the trees around me became dark, menacing silhouettes. With every snap of a twig, my heart leapt in my chest. Once I swear I heard footsteps, light ones like someone trying to be discreet. I convinced myself it was an animal. It had to be. I kept repeating that to myself like a prayer, clutching a mug of cold coffee between my hands. Still, I locked everything I could that night. The car, the supply box, even the tent, pulling the zipper to the top and checking it 3 times. Sleeping was nearly impossible. Every little sound seemed deafening. The rustling of leaves, the snap of a dry branch, the distant howl of some animal, or was it a muffled scream? I don't know. I only know that when I finally passed out, it was already dawn. And what I found when I woke up turned that trip into something that still chills me to the bone today. My car, until then my safe harbor, was different. The side paint, once chalk white, was now scratched with deep grooves, as if someone had dragged a knife or a key along it with brutal force. My first instinct was to look for footprints, but the packed dirt floor didn't help. That's when I saw it. A crumpled piece of notebook paper stuck under the windshield wiper. I picked it up with trembling hands. The message, written in shaky, angry handwriting, or perhaps rushed, simply said, "You shouldn't have come." The fear I felt at that moment wasn't the obvious kind where you scream and run. It was a cold, methodical fear that paralyzes you and makes you rethink every bad decision you've ever made. My head spun. Who had written that? Who was watching me? How many nights had they been there, lurking while I laughed at my own jokes or innocently fished? The silence around me mocked me. I needed to leave. I had to get out. But when I turned the ignition, another stab of panic hit me. The engine didn't respond. I tried again and again. Each turn of the key only produced a dry, desperate whine, as if the car itself were terrified. I jumped out, popped the hood without really knowing what to look for. My mechanical knowledge didn't go much beyond checking oil and windshield fluid. Still, it only took a glance. The engine cables had been neatly cut, like someone had done it calmly, unhurriedly. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't bad luck. Someone wanted me stuck there, alone, isolated. That's when it hit me. I wasn't just being watched. I was being hunted. The worst part was that there was no cell signal. Nothing. Just the dead bar and the damned words "no service" flashing on the screen. Walking to town. It was over 30 kilometers through deserted roads and woods I barely knew. In my condition, it would have been like signing my own death warrant. I sat in the driver's seat, locking every door, trying to think what to do. My brain felt like it was moving in slow motion, as if adrenaline had dulled my ability to reason. All I wanted was to disappear, to get away from there, to return to my mediocre life. Anything would be better than that suffocating feeling of being hunted. I spent hours there, in the driver's seat, staring at the muddy windshield and listening to my own heart pounding in my temples. Time passed slowly, the sun rising, then setting, until the sky began to tint purple and orange. I hadn't eaten since breakfast, and my stomach growled in protest, but I didn't dare leave the car, not even to retrieve the supply box a few meters from the tent. Every sound, every movement in the woods made me shrink back in the seat. It felt like at any moment a hand would burst through the window and drag me out. When night finally fell, I heard what sounded like footsteps. Not the light, cautious steps I'd heard before. These were heavy, purposeful, stomping on the loose earth, drawing closer to the car. My mouth went instantly dry. I tried to make myself invisible, sliding down in the seat as if that could somehow shield me. The footsteps stopped just a few meters away. A thick silence fell, so oppressive it felt tangible. Then something, or someone, scratched at the passenger door very slowly, as if drawing letters with a fingernail or a knife. I held my breath, frozen. The scratching was subtle, but so horrifying it felt like it tore at my soul along with the car's paint. I didn't dare lift my head or move a muscle. Through the tiniest gap in the window, I saw a silhouette, a thin, hunched figure wearing what looked like a heavy coat, even in that humid night. I could barely make out the face, hidden in shadow or a hood. Time seemed to stop as that presence hovered there, almost touching the glass, as if savoring my fear. After what felt like hours but must have been only minutes, the footsteps began to recede. I remained motionless, even after I heard nothing but the river's distant murmur and the wind rustling the trees. My mind screamed at me to do something, anything, but my body wouldn't respond. Only when I caught a whiff of smoke did my survival instinct finally snap me back to action. I turned my head and saw my tent blazing. The flames licked the canvas like famished tongues, grotesquely lighting the surrounding trees. This was no longer just a threat. It was a message, a clear message. You are not welcome here. And in that split second, I understood that staying put was no longer an option. Thick smoke filled the air, mingling with the metallic tang of fear coursing through me. I grabbed my backpack, which by luck was in the back seat, and bolted toward the road, not daring to look back. Every twig that snapped beneath my feet sounded like a, gunshot. Every shadow seemed to reach out to grab me. All I could think was, put as much distance as possible between me and that place. I ran through the darkness, tripping, clawing at branches, ripping skin on my arms and legs without caring. I only knew I had to reach the main road somehow. I prayed a car would pass, though I knew how unlikely that was in this remote area. At one point, I heard something behind me. Footsteps again, but now faster, more aggressive. That's when I realized they weren't just trying to scare me. They were hunting me for real. With every step I took in those woods, it felt like the darkness was dragging me back. I stumbled over roots, scratched my arms on low branches, felt skin burn where thorns tore in. My heart pounded so loud it drowned out even my own footsteps. There was no trail, just straight line running on pure instinct, clinging to the irrational hope that eventually I'd hit the road. The sense of being followed was crushing. It wasn't just paranoia. I clearly heard someone running behind me, sometimes closer, sometimes farther. The scariest part was how the forest seemed to shift around me. By day, those trees were just trees, the ground just ground. But at night, everything felt alive. Shadows flickered when I blinked. Non-existent whispers seemed to form in the wind. And at times, I swear, I heard low laughter coming from different spots in the woods, as if a dozen people were watching and enjoying my terror. My legs trembled, my lungs burned, but stopping would have been a death sentence. I knew that as certainly as I knew my own name. After what felt like an eternity, I finally spotted the road, a gray line in the darkness, faintly illuminated by moonlight. I nearly screamed in relief but held back. Part of me still feared drawing attention. I crawled onto the asphalt on knees and hands, face streaked with sweat, dirt, and tears, and looked both ways, praying for any sign of a passing vehicle. Nothing. Only the distant, river and the incessant croaking of frogs in a nearby swamp. I couldn't just stay there. I had to act. I stood, body screaming for rest, and began walking along the road's edge. Each footstep echoed in the oppressive silence. I walked for what felt like an hour, maybe more. Time seemed warped by that nightmarish ordeal. My feet and legs throbbed as if they'd fracture at any moment. Then I heard it, not a welcoming engine, but something far worse. Footsteps pounding through the woods parallel to me, as if my pursuers refused to let me go. Every broken twig behind me made me flinch, as if I could vanish into the shadows. It was impossible to tell how many of them there were. Part of me wanted to believe it was just an animal's curiosity, but those steps were too deliberate, too heavy for wildlife, and they never strayed away. They paused when I stopped, accelerated when I did, playing a perverse game where they controlled my hope. I began to hum a silly tune to keep my mind from unraveling, because the terror had shredded my thoughts. Each line trembled from my lips like a protective charm. I no longer knew where sweat ended and tears began. My head throbbed. I smelled wet earth mixed with that old smoke scent clinging to the abandoned campsite. Just when I thought I couldn't go on, when I felt my body beginning to collapse, I saw something ahead. A lone, rusted light post, leaning as if forgotten by God and man. Beneath it stood a small structure half sunken into the ground. An old abandoned phone booth like something out of a vintage movie. It felt miraculous. My leaden legs found strength. I sprinted toward it, stumbling and nearly falling, clutching at the hope burning in my chest like a torch. Inside, the booth was vandalized. Broken glass, a dangling door, but the ancient payphone still hung on the wall, rusted yet intact. Did it still work? I didn't care. I lifted the receiver with trembling hands. A faint crackle greeted me. No dial tone, but definitely not a deadline. This was my chance. I dialed 911 with clumsy fingers, praying for a connection. It rang once, twice. On the third ring, someone answered, but what I heard on the other end made me want to vomit with fear. A low, malicious laugh. I dropped the receiver as if electrocuted. The laughter echoed in my head, so close I felt it inside the booth, not through a line. Instinct screamed for me to run, to disappear, yet my legs felt rooted to the spot. I glanced at the road, empty, at the woods, immeasurable darkness. Then from the forest came that laugh again, now from more than one direction, as if they surrounded me, savoring my terror before the final strike. Without thinking, I abandoned the phone and bolted back toward the road, fleeing in blind panic. I had no idea where I was going, just away from them. Every breath stabbed my chest. The night felt alive, yanking me down, trying to trip me. And worse, I could hear steady footsteps behind me. Multiple sets, crunching. Leaves, breaking twigs, muffled shouts in a language I couldn't make out. It was a nightmare made real. Eventually the road sloped downward toward a bend. My feet slipped on loose gravel, forcing me to slow. That's when I saw headlights, coming toward me. My heart leaped. Hope. But as the vehicle drew near, dread froze me. A battered black pickup, its headlights jittering, engine chugging ominously. This wasn't rescue. It was continuation of my nightmare. With no other option, I hurled myself off. The road rolling into the rocky shoulder, curling into a ball as the truck rumbled past. In the bed, I caught sight of two figures standing stiffly, staring into the woods as if they knew exactly where I was. One held something long, maybe a wooden club or metal bar. My stomach lurched. If they spotted me, I knew I stood no chance. I stayed pressed in the gravel until the pickup's engine faded. Then I scooted into the trees, every movement agony as thorns scraped my skin. The woods were both refuge and prison. I crept as quietly as I could, ignoring the pain. Suddenly I heard a harsh shout from the road, stones kicked against pavement, curses. She won't get far. She'll tire out soon. Those words stuck like poison. I pressed deeper into the forest, guided only by instinct. After what could have been minutes or hours, I reached a small clearing. In the center stood crumbling stone walls, perhaps the remains of an old hunting cabin or storage shed. The rickety roof hung precariously, but it would do for shelter. I slid inside and collapsed behind a tangle of debris, breathing shallowly. Outside, I still heard distant calls. My name? How did they know my name? Had they seen my ID in the car? Panic twisted my gut. I wasn't random prey. They'd chosen me. Time blurred. Each crack or groan from the cabin made me flinch. In moments, I wasn't sure if sounds were real or my mind playing tricks. Then I heard the slow creak of the broken door being pushed open. I held my breath so tightly my lungs screamed. Footsteps on wood. Someone was in there. I could taste his breath, cigarette smoke and sweat, smothering me. He murmured something under his breath, like a dark prayer. I prayed the shadows hid me. But then I heard metal dragging, a chain or rope. He was getting closer. With primal force, I darted toward a collapsed wall opening, hearing him roar in rage behind me. I tore through the underbrush, branches clawing at my face, adrenaline fueling me beyond pain. For the first time in hours, I felt a flicker of hope. I could still fight. I ran until my legs buckled, chest burning like fire. The forest seemed endless, a living labyrinth designed to trap me. At one point, I tripped over a root, sprawling to the ground, tasting blood on my lips. I tried to scramble up, but feet pounded toward me, more than one pair. I rolled behind a massive tree trunk, pressing myself into its bark to remain unseen. My heart thundered. 2 flashlights bobbed past, beams slicing through foliage. I caught a glimpse of booted figures searching, voices angry. She won't last long. She's probably passed out by now. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to merge with the darkness. After what felt like eternity, the footsteps receded. I waited until complete silence reigned, then moved cautiously. Each step was agony, but I knew I couldn't outrun them again. I followed faint sounds of the river, hoping it would lead me out. At last I spotted a dilapidated wooden structure by the riverbank, a boat launch station, half rotted but standing. Creeping inside, I found an old radio on the counter. I turned the knobs desperately, static crackling. Then a distant voice broke through. "Station 14, do you copy?" Tears of relief blurred my vision. I slammed the transmit button. "Help, please. I'm at the old Missouri boat dock. Someone's trying to kill me." My voice shook, words choked by sobs. Seconds dragged like hours until a firm reply. "Stay put. We're sending help." My heart pounded so hard I thought they'd hear it. I ducked behind a bench, clutching the radio, each static burst ringing in my ears. I knew every second mattered. In the oppressive weight, every noise made me flinch. Then, sirens. Faint at first, then growing louder, red and blue flashes flickering through cracks in the wood. I dared to hope, but numbed fear held me frozen until I heard decisive shouts and more gunfire, police orders and return shots. When the door finally burst open, a beam of flashlight illuminated my terror-stricken face. "It's okay, you're safe now," a gentle but firm male voice called. I collapsed in tears, unable to speak. 2 officers helped me to my feet like I was glass. They wrapped a blanket around me and asked my name, if I was injured, how many attackers there were. I tried to answer through choked sobs. They led me outside, where I saw 2 men handcuffed on the ground, faces and clothes mud-stained. I didn't recognize them, but I never forgot their hunched silhouettes. On the ride to the nearest station, an hour away, they told me this stretch of the Missouri was known as unofficial territory for locals who preyed on outsiders. Travelers disappeared without a trace. I'd been lucky, they said. Lucky I found the radio. Lucky I survived. I spent the rest of the night giving my statement, sipping weak coffee and wrapped in blankets. Each time I recounted the footprints, the sabotaged engine, the note on the windshield, I relived the terror, my body convulsing with fear. My attackers, identified as members of a local violent family, faced charges, but the sheriff sighed that in a few months they'd likely be back on the streets. That harsh truth left a bitter taste. All I wanted then was to leave that place behind. The next day, an officer took me to the nearest garage. Seeing my car, deeply scratched, tires slashed, hood still open, hit me with crushing sadness. It wasn't just a vehicle. It symbolized freedom, peace, a new beginning, all destroyed. It took days of paperwork and tow trucks before I finally left that cursed spot. Even driving away in daylight, surrounded by other cars, I struggled to breathe, my heart thundering whenever a pickup appeared in my rearview mirror. Months later, I still bear scars, visible on my arms and legs, and invisible, far deeper in my mind. I never camp alone again. I never travel without telling someone exactly where I am. To this day, when I see a deserted road or spot an old pickup in my mirror, my heart still races as if I expect to hear those footsteps behind me. I never learned why they chose me or what might have happened if I hadn't found that old radio. All I know is that in that forgotten corner, far from the law's eyes, being an outsider was an unforgivable mistake, and I learned that the hardest way possible.